The Marvel Comics character, the Punisher, sprung out of the vigilante craze of the 70s. For this reason, many believe Frank Castle, the Punisher, was inspired by Death Wish or even Dirty Harry. After all, the Punisher arrived at the same time as those guys and emerged from the same high-crime urban climate of the 1970s. The Punisher also feels distant from comic book superheroes and more closely aligned with TV and film vigilantes. But why is that? The Punisher originated in a Spider-Man comic book, Amazing Spider-Man number 129, but he feels more like an anti-hero out of the pulps, or a vigilante from TV or film. If this is the first time we're meeting, hello, my name is Dave, and today we are talking about the Punisher. So how does he not feel like a comic book character? One way the Punisher is different from his fellow Marvel superheroes is his villains. The Punisher doesn't really have a rogues gallery like, say, Spider-Man. Spidey has the Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and Electro. The Punisher stories usually climax with him killing his adversaries. Killing his enemies is a defining element of his character, and death makes sequels very difficult. It's hard to have a part 2 in a Punisher book. Everybody's dead. He does fight Kingpin, but he's a borrowed villain. Comics are never going to let him kill off Daredevil and Spidey's main villain. The closest thing Punisher has is Jigsaw. All his other adversaries are street thugs, mafia, or street toughs who can be killed at the end of each issue. The Punisher is also different in appearance from comic book superheroes. He doesn't rely on supernatural powers, flashy heroism, and over-the-top confidence. Frank Castle uses guns, angst, and rage. Spider-Man and other superheroes wore bright, eye-catching costumes. The Punisher wore all black, a skull on his chest, and no mask. He came into a situation and caused havoc in the name of his own form of justice. General frustration with growing crime in the 1970s and an angered populace keen on violent, gun-based revenge fantasies allowed tough vigilantes like Harry Callahan, Dirty Harry, to take root in the pop culture zeitgeist. Catchphrases like "Make My Day" were being repeated by everyone. Even presidents were repeating slogans.
Thing to say to the tax increasers: go ahead, make my day.
Many readers of comic books felt that someone like Spider-Man was too soft to take care of real-life violence. The Silver Age mad scientists and purple-clad villains were far from what readers were seeing in newspapers and on television in real life. The Punisher entered to offer a more realistic and more brutal solution to what was happening in real life. Miranda rights and soft laws on crime were criticized by many for allowing too much leniency on violent criminals. Should accused muggers, mob bosses, and bad guys have such rights? Many were saying no, and characters like Dirty Harry, Charles Bronson, and the Punisher supplied an immediate response. It was cathartic and very popular with audiences. They sold tickets, these characters. And these characters had no powers or special effects. They basically pulled the trigger of a gun. This made them easy to turn into films. The Punisher had 3 or 4 films, while Marvel's heavyweights like Spider-Man and X-Men was still being made into cartoons. But why are the origins of Punisher and Death Wish so similar? Death Wish, the movie, followed Paul Kersey, Charles Bronson, a man who became a vigilante after his wife and daughter were attacked by criminals. He had served in the Korean War, and when the police were unable to find the criminals, he sets out to find them himself. Frank Castle, the Punisher, an ex-Marine who served in Vietnam, witnesses a mafia deal gone wrong. His family is shot down by the mobsters. When the police are unable to bring the criminals to justice, Frank Castle becomes the Punisher and avenges his family. The real influence was actually Don Pendleton's Mac Bolan, star of the Executioner series of novels. The series was about a Vietnam War veteran who fights a war on crime after his family is killed. The book series started in the late 1960s and was popular at the time. Jerry Conway, the writer of The Punisher, seemed to adapt elements of The Executioner, like Mac Bolan's battle van and his war journal style of exposition. But can we say he copied it or was influenced by it? Is there enough evidence? A war vet fights crime is so generic. No wonder there was so many of them in the 70s. It was in the air. All these characters were bouncing off each other. It would be hard to make any one definitive connection. Luckily, we have some interviews with Jerry Conway. I was fascinated by the Don Pendleton Executioner character, which was fairly popular at the time, and I wanted to do something that was inspired by that, although not to my mind a copy of it. And while I was doing the Jackal storyline, the opportunity came for a character who would be used by the Jackal to make Spider-Man's life miserable. The Punisher seemed to fit. And in 1997's Marvel Vision number 15, there was an article about the Punisher. I liked the idea of the Punisher, a loner, operating on the outside of the law and society, in a war to destroy all crime. I thought it would be interesting to have him go after Spider-Man, because the Daily Bugle had been calling him a criminal. The Punisher was a tough, unpredictable character. My inspiration was the Executioner series, the paperback books by Don Pendleton, their modern equivalent of the pulps. That's what gave me the idea for the lone, slightly psychotic Avenger. He's a character like the classic pulp heroes. There's even a little of the shadow in the Punisher. I think it's safe to say that everything comes from somewhere. Batman certainly has a bit of the shadow in his character, and Superman has bits of Doc Savage, and the Punisher has influences of Mac Bolan, the Executioner. Created by Don Pendleton in 1969. The Executioner was a series of pulpy adventure novels that were very popular. They would hit bookstore shelves every month. And as of 2023, there are over 400 installments of them printed. So I think we can safely say that the Punisher does not come from Death Wish or Dirty Harry. They are all pulpy composites of each other and bounced off one another in the gritty 70s. The major influence on the Punisher was the series The Executioner. But the idea itself is too generic. The Count of Monte Cristo and even Hamlet could be sourced if we went further back. And I'm sure there are more examples just in the 70s alone. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if I missed anything in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.